Hello everyone, today I'm in the Appalachian region of southern Kentucky in the once thriving coal mining town of Stearns, Kentucky. And the town's largest employer at one time was in that building directly ahead, and that was the Stearns Coal and Lumber Corporation. And now the building is being used as a museum, and it's actually a train museum, so I think I'll skip that one for now. But they do have a coal mining museum nearby, and this was a pretty big coal town at one time. The Stearns Coal and Lumber Corporation employed approximately 2,200 people at its peak, and now that company is now out of business, and they went from being the largest employer to pretty much going out of business, and now the largest employer in town is the government. In both education and healthcare are the two main sectors currently. There is maybe some coal mining, but not as much as there used to be, and they also do some lumber operations here as well. Anyhow, getting back to background information on Stearns. Median resident age is 47 years old. Per capita income is approximately $18,400, and that's about $4,000 above the poverty line per person. The median household income is approximately $38,000, and that includes everyone in the household. And the average household size here is about 2.3. And though the income levels are low, the housing prices are affordable here. The median home price is approximately $107,000. And this looks to be mostly a residential area in here, but we'll start to get into the business district pretty soon. And as far as the homes go, they're kind of a mix. Some of them are kept up, and some of them not so much. So it's kind of a mixed situation with the homes and the business buildings. But it seems like the town probably is not doing as well as it once was, but it's also not, it's not that bad here either. It's not like what you would expect from reading history about the Appalachian region. At least it's not as bad as I expected it to be. Anyhow, more background information. Crime is relatively low here at approximately 18 reported incidents per 1,000 people. So Stearns is a relatively safe place to live. 98% of residents are white, and unemployment rate is about 5.4%, which is pretty good considering this is a rural area, somewhat isolated. And just a little bit more background. 83% of residents graduated from high school. 22% went on to graduate from college. And those figures are roughly in line with the national averages for the education. So they have actually a relatively educated population here. And politics, 89% of residents are Republican, and they did vote for Trump. And that's pretty typical for small towns, apparently, to be mostly Republican. And this should be the start of the business district here. Off to the left, there's a dairy bar restaurant. It's kind of a interesting looking restaurant. I might stop there and check that out a little bit. And here is one of the restaurants in town. This one is called the Dairy Bar, and it looks to be a rather popular spot. And across the street there's a couple businesses, and that looks to be an apartment building. And the one in the center, that looks boarded up, and some more empty businesses down the street. Otherwise, a rather quiet Friday afternoon here in Stearns. And some of these businesses look to be empty. Farm Bureau Insurance Company. And this is more of the downtown area. I'm not sure what that's a public library. So maybe a few of those businesses back there were empty. It's kind of also a mixed situation. And that would be the end of the business district. And now it just gets into more of a rural area. There's also some houses up here too. That's a pretty interesting church. It says United Methodist Church. And here is this neat looking church building in Stearns, and it says it is a United Methodist Church. Pretty cool looking building. And directly behind the this Methodist church, it looks like they have a cemetery back here. And here is the cemetery behind the church, and it does look like most of these gravestones are post-Civil War, so they would be after the time of the Civil War, but still pretty eerie back here. And being that Stearns is a coal town, they do have a coal mining museum here. It's about maybe 3-4 miles outside of town. It's where they had their coal mining operations. And if I have time today, going to stop by there just to see what the coal mines look like. And I believe the coal mines that they have here are the one that's open to the public is a part of the National Park Service. So it's a coal mining museum basically. And this looks to be mostly residential in here. And I think we start to get towards the next small town coming up. I'm now at mine number 18, just outside of Stearns, Kentucky, and this is a pretty big operation that the Stearns Coal and Mining Company had here. This mine closed down in the 1960s due to the relatively high cost to operate the mine itself. It was an underground mine, as most of the mines in Kentucky are. And the way the brochure explains this is the coal was brought in from the mines in this area on this rail overpass up above, and then it was sorted and then loaded onto these rail cars here. And this here shows the Stearns Coal Yard in Stearns, Kentucky, while the mine was in operation. And it also shows the various rail cars that they had available at the time. And here is a photo of some of the coal miners at this mine number 18, and looks like it was dated 1939. And hello everyone, today I'm in the Appalachian mountain region of central Kentucky, and the next town that's coming up is Sandgap, Kentucky, population 2,831, and this really is up here in the Appalachian Mountains, and it's kind of isolated here. The closest major city would be Lexington, Kentucky, and that is approximately 50 miles away. And this forest here is rather interesting. It's a very dense forest, and there's a lot of trees. It looks like vines and all kinds of stuff, but it's almost like a rainforest up here. So very green, lots of trees. It looks like there's a storm coming through right now, so hopefully it won't start raining just yet. Anyhow, some background information on Sandgap. The median resident age is approximately 36. Per capita income is $16,700 per person. That is pretty low. That's about $4,000 above the poverty line. Though it is a rather cheap place to live, somewhat cheap. The median home price is approximately $84,000, and the houses here, it's kind of a mixed bag situation. Like most small towns, some are kept up and some not so much, but that's not as really cheap as I thought it would be. I mean, that's almost getting close to $100,000, and so it might be a little difficult if you're only making $16,000 a year to afford a house for $84,000. And major employer here seems to be the Dollar General store. As far as I can tell, that would be like the grocery store, somewhat of a grocery store. Though what I'm finding with a lot of these Dollar Generals is that they really don't sell like fresh produce or fruit. They do have stuff like milk, and then they have a lot of canned foods, kind of junk food stuff really. But also, one other thing about these rural areas is the price of food is somewhat expensive. There are like some things that such as, say, like ice cream, I would say is at least maybe 50% more than I would expect it to be. So the cost of living, the housing might be cheap, but there's some other things that really aren't that cheap living here. Let's see, what else do we have? Crime is slightly below average here in Sandgap at 25 incidents per 1,000 people. So it is a rather safe place to live. And that looks like a church building there on the left. Might have to come back to that. It says Sandgap Holiness Center, and this is the downtown area here, and directly ahead is the Family Dollar General. And maybe I'll just stop here real quick and take a look around. And here is downtown Sandgap. There's the grocery, the Family Dollar store, and across the street looks like a vacant business. It says RT's on the window, but that looks pretty empty. Just looks like there's a couple mattresses over there, and then they have looks like RV parking. Not a whole lot here going on in this area. And then there's a Collins discount variety store. Anyhow, back in the car and just gotta check out the rest of the town of Sandgap and some more background information. See, I left off on the low crime, so relatively low crime here, and some of the some demographic information. 99% of the city is white. Unemployment here is approximately 5.2%, which is rather surprising that it's that low. Household size approximately 2.4 people. 49% of residents graduated high school and 5% completed college. That is a bit lower than the national average. And for politics, this is rather surprising. 90% of residents are Republican. And that's just one more contradiction for the small town life. And looks like we're pretty much out of the city part of it, the downtown part, but there's still some houses, residential areas here. And then it gets into like a rural area, but overall it is very scenic though, the mountains and the trees. And at one time they did have coal mining operations in this area, but those have all closed down, and which is pretty typical for the whole state of Kentucky. Their coal operations were mostly underground, and they just were too expensive, and coal has been phased out as a fuel for like the last decades, or it's being phased out. It's still used somewhat, but not as much as before.